and welcome to Studio Jakarta EE. We're live here, and I have a super special guest with me here today. Welcome, Dalia.
Hello, everyone.
So, you are working as a developer advocate at JetBrains.
Yes, it's a new job. I just started 2 months ago, as of 2 days ago. So yeah, it's been very interesting, very uh, different job than I had before. So it's been pretty nice.
Yeah, it's kind of a special time to work as a developer advocate nowadays because developer advocates travel, but not anymore.
Yes, not this year.
No. Yeah. So, I've seen people figuring out different ways of doing it by having like airplane chairs in their living room and serving plastic food on plastic plates. But are you doing any of these kind of things?
Yeah, well, I'm doing more of a like let's catch up and talk to people live. Like I've liked that everyone that I would usually see at a conference, sometimes we just have a call and hang out or do something and sometimes we live stream it so that other people are in on the conversation. But it's kind of I do miss people seeing people in person, but we're compensating by just doing different things and working around it a little bit. And then you get to talk to a lot more people if you're online because conferences are more accessible that way and you don't have to travel and pay for all that. So I have been able to talk to more developers that maybe I wouldn't have been if I'm just going to conferences.
Yeah, that's true. And but it's long hours in front of the computer. We're not used to it.
Yes,
So,
definitely. You've got to force yourself to get up and look outside or like see the sun.
yeah. But here today we are going to talk about Jakarta EE and some tooling support for Jakarta EE. And you saw our Jakarta One live stream last week,
Yes,
didn't
that
you?
was
Yeah.
so great. Yeah, I really loved the different presentations. That was some of the presentations were just nice to see folks that I've collaborate with on in the community and contributors and all the hard work that went into Jakarta E9. It was a lot of work. I check in on Kevin Sutter all the time and I always ask him like how are things going, and it's just amazing how much collaboration and how much everyone came together to release. So it was really awesome to just kind of be part of the celebration, learn about the different projects, different features coming up, and you know different releases that we're planning, and seeing the transformer project and all the different vendors kind of trying to work together to get something working for everyone else. So that I thought that was a really nice day and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and one interesting thing that I noticed was there were lots of talks. I think we had 11 different talks,
Hmm.
and I think the speakers used a variety of tooling because nowadays you usually see people using VS Code in every talk, but here we had a couple of VS Code, a couple of Eclipse, a couple of talks with NetBeans actually, and a couple of talks with IntelliJ IDEA. So it was an even distribution of all the tooling as well.
Yep. It was really good. Just kind of showing developers that you're not stuck with any tool. You can use whatever tool you think will make your life easier, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. So and talking about tooling, today we're talking about IDEA, and you have some demos you want to show us.
Yeah, so I'm starting to really get comfortable with IntelliJ IDEA and really loving the experience there. So a lot of what I'm doing is just writing code and seeing how it works and seeing how can I, teach more developers how to use IntelliJ IDEA more effectively while I'm teaching myself as well. Getting used to the shortcuts. I used Eclipse for many many years, and switching to IntelliJ, I see a lot of really good features there. So, a lot of my job is looking at how can you effectively use the tools that you're using so that you can mm, basically not worry about the tool as much as worrying about the code itself and what it does. So, I had I played around a bunch with some of the samples and I turned those into tutorials, and I wanted to come in and just kind of show everyone what I have and answer any questions they have.
Yeah, and you told me a little secret here before we started that you had never used IntelliJ before you started this job.
No, like barely any touching any IntelliJ before this. And after I used the community edition, because that one is free even, I was like, I don't know why I've never used IntelliJ. This is pretty great. I'm learning with other people, which I think is really nice as far as like peer mentoring and peer teaching and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's the best way of learning is just by
Hmm.
doing.
Yes.
So should we maybe look at some code then?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. All right. So I think it should come through just fine. And if anyone has issues with seeing fonts or anything, let me know. I made my resolution a lot um, bigger so that people can see it. So I did want to start out showing creating a very basic Jakarta EE Hello World. So a lot of when I was doing this research, I wanted to focus on Jakarta. I knew the namespace was coming. I could have picked doing some stuff with Java X. I was like, no, I want to do stuff in Jakarta. It's the forward, all the projects moving forward are going to use Jakarta. I don't want to have to migrate or do anything with it. So everything I'm going to show today is going to use the Jakarta namespace. Um, so I'm starting up IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate. They've actually changed the wizard recently, and they made it very nice to be able to create new projects and search for old projects. And they're doing a lot of improvements in that area, which I've been very pleased with. So you open up the new project window, and there's a bunch of different types of projects you could create. Usually, it starts out with the Java wizard, but I always switch to Java Enterprise if I'm doing anything with Jakarta. I have actually messed with these Java versions. I started off creating a project, a Hello World project with Java 11, and then I ran into the problem that Glassfish doesn't support Java 11 right now. So just word of caution, if you're using Glassfish, you want to use Java 8 for now. And I know coming up they're planning on releasing a more updated version that uses Java 11. Is that right, Ivar?
Oh yes, it is, and it's coming in Q1 next year, maybe Q2. It
Awesome.
depends on who you ask, but
Yeah.
we're going to support Java 11, and it will actually be an update to Jakarta EE specification. So we will release a Jakarta EE 9.1
Yes.
to really show that there is a new support, even though there may not be any updates to the APIs, but we'll see.
Yes.
There could be.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about which Java version do you want to use, some of the other app servers support newer Java versions. I know Open Liberty is working really hard to keep up with the release cadence, so you could probably use a new Java version at this point. But I wanted to be safe and I wanted to use Java 8, so that's what we're gonna use today. One of my favorite features in IntelliJ IDEA, and I know some people are gonna laugh at this, is actually being able to download the JDK. It's something that for me it's super convenient because I can just pick my Java version and download whatever it is, especially with the more frequent release cadence. So this is one of my favorite features, even though you don't really have to do it that often. It's just really nice. So, anyways, I'm gonna cancel out of that because I already have Java 8. Another thing that I really like is that they added this project template. And in this case you can start with some basic files that you can just start with kind of a skeleton, and a lot of times I have to like look for kind of a simple hello world skeleton or whatever it is. In this case you could just select this and it'll load it up for you. I thought that was really nice. And then you can select the application server you want to use. So IntelliJ IDEA supports a bunch of different application servers. I wanted to use Glassfish in this case. Um, I think it's the first compatible Jakarta EE app server, right?
Yes, it is, and currently it's the only one,
Okay. Yeah.
but the others are just around the corner.
Yes. Yes. Definitely. So I'm gonna select Glassfish. It's gonna looking weird because I changed my resolution here. A lot of people would say, "Oh, you have Glassfish already set up." I like to show things from scratch. So here's how I set up my Glassfish. I just go to my downloads folder here, and I'm gonna paste this in the um, chat, and you can paste it wherever you'd like, Ivar. I go to my downloads page. I download whichever Glassfish version I want. So the funny thing is, I did a tutorial with Release Cadence 2, and that worked just fine. And then I tried yesterday to update to Release Cadence 3, and I ran into an error, and I opened a bug for that. So that's why I'm gonna be going back to Release Cadence 2. Hopefully, the bug gets fixed, and then you can get the updated version of Glassfish, and it won't have the issue that I was running into. So I'm gonna be using Glassfish 6 Release Cadence 2, and this shouldn't take too long, but of course I am on Wi-Fi. So, when you're using any of the app servers, it's really good to look at their documentation and see what's the latest Jakarta EE or Java EE version they're using, and accordingly, you can choose your app server. Same with the Java versions. Like, are they sticking with the long-term supported releases of Java, like Java 8 and Java 11, and then 17 coming out, or are they using Java 15? Personally, I like to tell developers that are in the enterprise space to use Java 11, just because a lot of the tooling focuses a lot more on getting their tools and libraries working on Java 11, and then worry about the newest Java versions later. So it's just a tidbit there when you're working with your application. So still going. Any comments or questions in the chat? Should have done this beforehand.
Yeah, so most people just say hi, so I've said hi back to them.
Oh, hey
So,
everyone.
yeah, so it's pretty cool. We have a couple of watchers there. It looks like it, and of course it will be available on Studio Jakarta EE afterwards, so everybody can watch it
Sounds
whenever
awesome.
it's at their convenience.
And I'd be interested in knowing if people have started using Jakarta EE and the Jakarta namespace in particular, and if they have migrated anything in that space. Okay,
Yeah.
so it looks like
So if you have any questions for Dalia, just put them in the comments, and we will answer them.
yes. Okay, cool. So it's all good and done. I'm gonna extract it here, and I'm just gonna grab the URL and go back to IntelliJ. Let me clear out my windows so that it's not so crowded here. And I'm going to paste it here. And that's all I need to do to configure it. So it's going to load up the configuration for Glassfish, and later on we're going to do a little bit more with it. But at this point, that's what I need to do for Glassfish. You can choose your build tools if you're using Gradle, if you're using any other um, build tools you can use. But for me, I like Maven. I use JUnit and any other languages you can select here. So I'm going to click next. And here's where you choose the framework you're going to be using. So you could be using Java EE8. This is going to use all the Java X stuff. There's a really long list of compatible implementations, and even Hibernate is on this list. But once you switch to EE9, you'll notice that Hibernate, for example, have not updated yet, so you won't see it on this list. So it depends on where you're at right now. If you feel like you want to create a whole new project with Jakarta, you can use Eclipse Link for JPA or Java persistence. But if you're wanting to use Hibernate, you could go back to the Java EE8 option and choose that instead. Today, I want to use Jakarta, so I'm going to use Jakarta EE9, and then it's going to select Servlet for me because I already told it I'm going to be using a web application template, and at minimum, it needs a Servlet framework. So that's what I'm going to select. There's a bunch more here, but I'm not going to select any of those. I want the bare minimum. And then I'm going to give it a name, Jakarta EE on Live Studio. And then give it a company name. And then let's click finish. And that's just creating the project. So right now, IntelliJ IDEA is going to generate all the files that you're going to need, including the template files that we're going to use. It's going to configure your application server, and you're going to have the files open up to, for example, in this case, it actually created an index.jsp file for me that will display a hello world message and a link to a servlet that's also going to print off a hello world. So it already has an index.jsp file for you, and it already has a servlet for you, so you can use that and build upon it. And I really like that a lot.
Yeah. How would life as a developer advocate be if we didn't have Hello World?
Yes, it's very nice to always Google for Hello World and then your favorite framework and always find some kind of tutorial about that. So it's awesome. Okay, so this is your JSP file. It's gonna link off to your servlet and it looks all good. I wanna run it, but there's one more step I need to do. I need to actually configure my Glassfish run. So I'm gonna go to Glassfish to the Glassfish configuration. It's gonna pre configure everything for me. It's gonna open up my browser once the application runs, and this is where some interesting configuration comes into place. I like to change my on-frame deactivation to update classes and resources. What this is gonna do is it's gonna update the static files underneath the covers for me, and it's gonna update it so that if I go off of IntelliJ IDEA and go to my browser, I can just refresh and see my changes. I don't like having to restart or do anything, so I just want it to be uh, instantaneous basically for me. So that's why I'm gonna change this here. It tells me down here that I need a domain, and the nice thing is Glassfish already creates a domain one for me, so I'm gonna use that. And then it tells me some debug setting needs to be done, so I'm gonna click fix, and that's all I'm gonna do in this area. It's already gonna have the deployment set up already for me, so it's gonna deploy the expanded war for me, and I can click OK, and then I can give it a minute so that it can configure it, and then click run. And at that point, it's gonna start my Glassfish server. You're gonna see at the bottom here, this services window is gonna come up. It's gonna give you the output of the Glassfish server coming up. So if I have any problems or errors, I'm gonna always just see it in front of me, and I'm gonna be able to go to the logs and figure out what's going on there. That thing I used a lot when I was trying to debug why Java 11 wasn't working with Glassfish, and then finally I determined, okay, I need to switch back to Java 8. So here it is. It's saying it's starting the domain, and it's waiting for my word to be deployed. And once it deploys it, it's you know how servers are. It's gonna take a second, and then it's gonna deploy, and it came up on my other window, so that's not super helpful. Let me bring it here. There it is. So here is my application. Here's your hello world, and it has a link to your servlet. You click on the servlet. It's gonna, oh, I didn't show you the servlet. Let me show you the servlet really quick. The servlet is just a really basic servlet that has a do get method. It takes in the message and it prints it out. So that's what you're seeing here is when you go to the servlet, that's what it's doing. And then you go back and here is the home page. Of course, we want to play around with it. We don't just want to take what we have and not do anything with it. So let's go back here and say something like, hello from Jakarta EE Live Studio. This is your host. No, we're going to save this. And the nice thing is I can just go back to my browser, don't have to restart my server. I can just refresh and see my changes. So you can just keep iterating on it, and changing things, and then just seeing it right away.
Yeah,
So
and
that's
this
something that
is
I really
super
like.
productive for a developer to be able to see that
See their changes right away.
directly. Yeah.
Yep. Yep, it's very nice. It's one of my favorite features too. Um, at that point, you might want to, build on top of this. You have the template files. You could do whatever you want. Once you're ready, you can mess with this for your server operations. So, for example, a lot of times you might want to run it in debug mode, or you want to do different operations on it. A lot of times, I just don't want my Glassfish server to be running the whole time, so I'm just gonna stop it at this point, and take any questions and see if anyone has any questions over this demo before we move on to the next one.
Yeah, there aren't any questions right now, but what I like about this is the developer experience. It's just so smoothly. You never have to leave the tool.
Yes, that's a really good point. So one of my other things that I really like is this terminal window. So a lot of times I have some commands that I just want to run, and I don't want to keep flipping between my command line and my code. So here you could just run your commands, and you can keep going and keep building on this while you're doing whatever you're doing. So
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite windows in IntelliJ IDEA.
Yeah, so there is one comment or a question here, whether there is an internal browser in IntelliJ, so you don't have to switch to the browser window.
Oh, good question. I know. Let's see if we can figure this out because um I've done that with Eclipse, but I have not done it here. I don't see one, but there might be one that I'm not aware of. I'm gonna get back to you on that.
Yeah, there could probably be some plugins because there is a variety of plugins you can use as well, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, there is. That's a great question. I'm gonna write that down.
But and these server features you're showing here, they are available if you have the ultimate licensed version and not in the community edition.
Yes. So there is a certain things you could do. You could still do, terminal. You can start your Glassfish in the terminal and still be developing and all that good stuff. You can get it to work, but this services window is available in IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate.
Yeah,
Any other
yeah,
questions?
not at the moment. So yeah, this is really cool. So we are 20 minutes out, and so if you want to go further and develop on this application and make it, because let's face it, even if we would like this world where we can only write hello world in a servlet, that would be awesome because then we would be able to spend a lot of time on doing other things. But
Yes.
usually we have to do some more business stuff in our applications, or integrate with some systems or
Yes.
something.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I definitely want to show more. I did notice that this comes up, and I have not noticed it before. I don't know how this works. I'm gonna look into it. So the other thing, when Ivar asked me to come and talk, I was also looking into creating a Jakarta persistence application because I've done a lot of GPA development. I was an Eclipse Link committer, and I really wanted to see how would it work if I wanted to create a JPA. Oh, we can't call it JPA, right? Like Jakarta persistence. I'll call it
You
Jakarta
can actually
persistence.
call it JPA as long as you say Jakarta persistence first,
Okay.
and making sure that this is what you're talking about, so there are no ambiguities.
Yes. Okay. So I wanted to create a Jakarta persistence application using the Jakarta APIs and persist some stuff. And I've been working on that. So I figured we'll try this out right now. It's not gonna go as smoothly as this demo, but we can debug it together. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a whole new project because I don't want to be using any of my existing app server stuff. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna create a whole new project. I'm gonna go to my Java Enterprise wizard. This time I can use Java 11 because I'm not gonna be using any application server in this case. And then I'm gonna use my library template. This one is like the bare bones You're not going to use any web application, anything, or JAX-RS. And then I'm going to say I don't want to use any application server. I'm just going to have a standalone JPA application. So I'm going to configure Java 11 library, no app server. I'm still going to use Maven and JUnit, leave that alone. And then I'm going to switch to Jakarta EE9. I'm going to select persistence. So this is going to bring in the Jakarta persistence APIs. So just the APIs themselves. And then you have to choose an implementation. So for me, I'm going to click Eclipse Sync just because I don't think there's any other implementation available as of now. And I think Eclipse Sync is the only one. And then hopefully I'm hoping that Hibernate can come next and other implementations can be added to this list. And then I'm gonna click next. I'm gonna say my persistence application. That's a really long name, but let's do it anyways. I'm gonna give it a group ID, and then we're gonna click finish, and I'm gonna open it up in a new window. So what's going to happen here is you're going to have the bare bone file, which is the pom.xml file with the dependencies that you've selected. So you'll see that it put in your Jakarta persistence API dependency over here and your Eclipse link dependency down here as well. And the funny thing is, I've been doing so much exploration in this area that I'm finding a bunch of things that we could improve upon, and working with the Ultimate team, which have been very nice and responsive to me. So I'm going to show you and talk about some stuff that is going to be coming up next. One of the things that I asked them to do is, if we don't have any application server, we should not have a provided scope here, because it'll assume that your GPA APIs are provided by the application server. So in your case, if you're using Jakarta persistence within an application server, you should leave this here. But if you're not, you should remove it so that you can force Maven to bring in your APIs, because later on, that's what you're going to need when you're actually deploying your application. The other thing is, we're updating all the versions to be the latest. In this case, I think the latest version of Eclipse Sync is going to be, oh, sorry about that. The latest version of Eclipse Sync, I think, is 3.0.0. I was bringing up my POM so I can make sure that that's the right one. Yes, it is. And that's what you're going to need in your POM file for Jakarta persistence by itself. The other thing you also need with any persistence application is your database. I was wondering which database to use. If you follow me at all, you'll see me moaning about how hard it was to set up my SQL. In this case, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to worry about my database. I'm just going to use an embedded database. So I ended up using HyperSQL based on some recommendations for my colleagues. So that's what I'm going to use here. I'm going to use HyperSQL DB. And the nice thing is that you can just start typing stuff in and it's going to find it. Actually, there's even a nicer thing. Okay, I'm not going to do this way. The nicest aspect of the POM XML here is that you can do like alt insert, click dependency, and search for your artifact. A lot of times I have to go to Google and search for the Maven coordinates for my dependency. You don't have to do that. You can actually search for it within IntelliJ IDEA. That was something that was really eye-opening for me and I really liked. So if I look for HyperSQL's DB drivers, I can just find them here. So whatever you're using, if you're using Derby or using MySQL, whatever you use, you can search for your drivers for that database here and select the latest version you want. So in my case, I'm going to choose the latest HyperSQL driver and select add, and it's going to add the coordinates for me here. So I know I spoke really fast. I hope that makes sense to everyone.
Yeah, that's really awesome, and that's basically Maven Central available in your IDE.
Exactly, exactly. It was super nice to not have to go and search and look through all the different coordinates. So I really like that. The one thing that I want to remind everyone to do once you do this, because I keep forgetting, is to refresh or load your Maven changes. It's one thing that you have to do in Eclipse as well. you have to tell Maven to go off and actually get your dependency. So don't forget to click that button. I know the shortcut in Windows is, I think, Control Shift O or something like that. Just make sure you reload your POM XML file, or you're gonna find that you get class not found issues later on.
Yeah.
So I think
Actually,
go ahead.
a little shout out to NetBeans here, because in NetBeans you don't have to do this refresh thing.
Cool.
It's just there.
You know what? I might talk to the Ultimate team about it and see if they can make it kind of a something that happens when you save the file.
Yeah.
That's a good point there. All right, so I'm saving my POM XML. I've gotten done with the dependency. So the next thing I want to show you is this persistence window. Oh, by the way, another thing that I'm using a lot because I'm learning a lot of shortcuts is my search everywhere functionality. In Windows is Shift Shift. I don't remember what it is in Mac, but I'm sure someone's gonna tell me in the comments. You could do Shift Shift and search for whatever you setting you need, whatever file you need, whatever anything you need. It's like something that I've really appreciated because I don't have all the shortcuts memorized. I don't have all this, I don't know where the settings are, any of that. So I can just do Shift Shift and go to wherever I want to go. So I do that. I'm opening up my persistence tool window. And this window is basically dedicating to Jakarta persistence or JPA. Here you'll see that IntelliJ IDEA actually created a persistence XML file for you, which is super nice because a lot of times I have to search for this top part of the file so I can get it quite right. And it created a default persistence unit. And the nice thing about this window is that you can right click on your persistence unit, you can click new, and then you can create an entity. I thought that was really helpful because then it adds the class for me in the persistence unit. I don't have to add it myself. So I'm going to create a class. We'll call it employee. And then we're going to put it in an entity folder, mainly because I just like all my entities to be in one folder. It's going to make it red because it doesn't exist, and it's going to create it for me. So that's really nice. And you'll see that it adds it in my persistence unit, which is super nice. The other nice thing that I found is that you can navigate to this class from your persistence XML file. So I think it's Control Alt B, if I remember correctly, and you go right there, right into your entity class. So one thing that I noticed was that IntelliJ IDEA wasn't adding this add entity for me, and I went to the Ultimate team and they fixed it right away. So that's something you'll see in hopefully in January with the next release of IntelliJ IDEA, the EAP release. So you'll see the IntelliJ, the entity annotation being added here. The other thing I also talked to them about is adding an ID attribute automatically for you, so you don't have to select and do this. So that's something else that's coming that I'm really appreciative that it's going to be there because it just makes my life a lot easier. I'm going to add an ID. I'm going to make it a field access. That's my favorite. I know some people will use property access. I like to see my annotations on my fields, so that's where I'm going to put it. And I'm going to tell it, can you please add the generated value for me? So it's going to do that. And oh, yes, that's something that they haven't, they actually did made it so that it adds both these without even prompting anything else. So with the new IntelliJ IDEA version, when you create a new entity, it's gonna do all this for you. So you won't even have to worry about adding the ID yourself. So we've got my employee entity, which is extremely boring right now. It doesn't have any fields, so let's add some fields. We're gonna add first name. We're gonna add the last name. And I need a bunch of boilerplate code. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take advantage of some of the generation items. It's Alt Insert for Windows, and all of these shortcuts are available on Mac. I should have the Mac stuff memorized, but that's the next step for me. But it's you can
And don't forget Linux as well.
yes, it's a lot of times the Windows and the Linux are the same, which is
Yeah.
super convenient.
And all these shortcuts are available under help. You have a cheat sheet somewhere there, I think.
Yes, I can post that once. You know what? You know what I'm gonna do because no, not persistence. Presentation assistant. Oh, it's not coming up. I don't know why. I usually have the shortcuts come up when I'm typing it, and it helps me out a lot. But I don't know what happened with mine, so I'm gonna remember that for next time. So,
That's
anyways,
actually an awesome tip while you're learning. Not only
yes,
for presenters, it's a good thing for if you're starting to learn the idea and you can start typing things and it prompts you a shortcut you can use
hmm
next time.
yes, exactly, exactly. Okay, so I'm going to generate some stuff, and I'm gonna use the generate window here. I'm going to first off, entities have to have a new arg constructor. So I'm just gonna create a new arg constructor really quick. I'm gonna say select none because I don't want it to have any arguments here. I'm also going to generate some getters and setters for all my fields, and I'm going to generate my equals and hash code methods because that's a pretty useful methods to have in your entity. IntelliJ IDEA will prompt up some of the fields and ask you, okay, in your equals method, what do you want to compare? Typically, you don't want to compare the other fields. You just want to compare your ID, and then you have the hash code. It's fine right there. Select all non-values. That's the ID, and then you click finish, and it's gonna generate your equals and hash code down here. So that's really nice. I don't have to do all the boilerplate code myself. I can just generate it, and it's gonna be right there. Also, notice that there's a bunch of gutter icons here, and it's telling me which fields are being persisted. So, for example, like this one is an ID, so it has this key next to it, and the same with first name and last name. It has like, okay, these are gonna be persisted um, in your table. And then it actually has this that you can navigate to your persistence window if you double click it, but I already have it open, so it doesn't do anything for me right now. So that's my employee entity. So let's go ahead and use it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a Java file. I can call it app or main or whatever you'd like, whatever you want to do. Something I really like here is I can just uh, type main and click enter, and it's gonna do the whole thing for me. I don't know how I don't remember the whole thing for me. I think it's the shortcuts are making you rely on them too much. And if anyone tells me you should type out public static void main, I'm just gonna flip something or do something wrong here. But anyways, it is nice and convenient that they do it for me. So I'm gonna create an employee item object. It suggests a name for me, which is super nice. So I'm just gonna take that. I would have gone with imp or something not very descriptive, but they're keeping me honest. And I'm gonna create an entity, and then I'm going to populate the first name and last name. I like to use mine, so that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm gonna do this and do last name, and I'm gonna call it, and it's, it thinks there's a typo here, which kills me every time I see it. I'm like, it's the right name. And then I'm gonna, now I can persist my employee. So I created an employee object. Here's my entity. It's all good. And now I can use one thing that I really like about this is that if I don't want to type any manager factory, I can basically look up the first letters of the class, and it brings it up. So EMF, and it brings up any manager factory because it's kind of long to type, which I appreciate. It's gonna suggest a name for me, which is super nice. And then I'm going to call persistence dot create any manager factory. Gonna pass it in the persistence unit name. In case you forgot, it's called default, like we can see here, and we're going to use the default persistence unit name. You can change it after you're done. Of course, these are all really simple stuff. You can change all of this as you like. And then we're going to create an entity manager. It's going to suggest a name. Thank you, IntelliJ. And then I'm going to do an entity manager factory, create my entity manager, and then you're ready to create your transaction. So I'm going to do get transaction dot begin, any manager dot. Now you can persist your object. So I'm persisting my employee object. So that's gonna take my Java object and it's gonna persist it in my database, and we'll see that in a little bit. And then entity manager dot get persistence, get the transaction, and then commit, and then make sure you clean up all your resources. This was a really hard lesson for me to remember because I only closed my entity manager only my entity manager, and I didn't close my entity manager factory, and I kept wondering where my table was going. It turns out it's because I didn't close my resources. So make sure you close all your resources. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna close that up. Some application server take care of this for you. So just keep in mind your application server might be managing your any manager and any manager factory. But if you're running standalone, no one is managing anything for you. So make sure you're closing your resources, taking care of all that, so you're not doing
Are,
anything.
are are these actually implementing the auto closable so you can do it in the try clause?
Yes, I could do try catch. That's a really good point. Yes, that's a really good tip. So you could do try catch and do it in the finally even, so that if something goes wrong, you can catch it there. Okay, so last thing that you need to do for your Jakarta persistence um, application is you need to actually configure your database, of course. So in your persistent XML file, you're going to create your properties. This is something that I like is I can just type in properties, click enter, and it'll create my stanza for me. Type in my property, it's going to fill in the name and value. Thank goodness. And then type in my Jakarta persistence property. I am going to cheat here and open it up somewhere else and copy paste it because it's going to take a while to type up. Okay, so here's what I did. What I did is I created my driver. In this case I'm using HyperSQL, so this is the JDBC driver. And then by the way, I'm gonna push this code up hopefully really soon to GitHub so people can just copy paste and not have to worry about typing it themselves. And then in my URL, I am using the embedded HyperSQL database with this as my URL. The really nice thing about this is that I don't have to create the database myself. It's just going to create it for me, and it's going to create the tables for me because I put this property here. So you're going to specify your URL over here. You're going to have your user. You're going to have your password. This is the most secure user and password you could use. And then this property, I love this property. So this property is letting you drop and create the tables every time you're running your application. The nice thing about this is that if I'm creating an entity, a lot of times I'm just kind of building, okay, I want to add this thing and I want to add an email and I want to add an address and all this stuff. I don't want to have to go to my database and drop and recreate and see what it looks like. This does it for me. So I love this property. However, if you're not paying attention, you might be wondering, okay, where did my data go? So don't keep this in your XML. Just use it when you're doing development. And once you're settled on a table or a schema that you like, then take it out because it's going to keep dropping your table and all your data is going to go away. So just
Yeah.
FYI on this. Ivar, you
Yeah,
have something to say?
Hibernate actually has a nice twist to this. They have this update thingy that so you can actually do changes to the schema.
Oh, yeah.
DBAs hate it, but developers will like it.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, I really like these, and I really like to use the Jakarta properties. Whenever I get a chance to use something that's not implementation specific, I take advantage of it because I know there's a lot of Eclipse Link specific properties and a Hibernate specific properties, and because I know a lot about migration, I've always tried to use the generic Jakarta ones or Java X ones so that if I ever down the road change my implementation, it's a lot easier that way. So that's just something that I like to do. Okay, so it looks good, and we're hoping that we can actually run this. So let's try it out. Moment of truth here. I think the run shortcut is nope, that's not it. Control Shift F10. See, I'm learning with everyone. Control Shift F10 is to run, or you can click on the run button up here, and it'll tell you what shortcut it is in Mac. So If you're on a Mac, that's one thing that you can definitely do to look up. Oh, you know what? Let me paste the shortcuts. Let's see. I'm gonna open this up and I'm gonna paste. I have an IntelliJ IDEA reference page that has all the shortcuts in it, and I want to paste that in here so people can follow along. And Ivar, if you could paste it in the chat, that'd be great. This is something I use for the mappings, and it has a page for Windows and a page for Mac. So I have that bookmarked in my toolbar. It's super useful. So definitely you can use that as a guidance for shortcuts. So back to our app. It actually ran successfully, even though you see an error here. The reason you see an error here is something I'm not a big fan of from an Eclipse Link perspective. When they go and drop the sequence table because we're generating the ID, they don't find the sequence table, so they complain about it really loudly. It doesn't really matter. It's just the first time you run it, it's gonna do this, and the subsequent times, it's not gonna have a problem because the sequence table is gonna already be there. Just ignore it. It's not great to ignore errors, but in this case, it's fine. It actually ran just fine. It went through and it created the database, the embedded database, and we can actually see stuff now. So you notice that I created my object, I persisted it, and you might be wondering, okay, what does this look like in my database? So that's when you can go to your database view, and I'm not even gonna set it up the long way. I'm gonna do it the short way. I'm gonna copy the URL and I'm going to click new in my database window. I'm going to go to data source from URL. I'm going to paste it in here. I'm going to click OK. It's going to pre-populate the configuration for me. I don't like Target because it's too generic as a name. I'm going to call it MyDB. Enter in the username and password. You put it in your persistence XML, the super secure password that I picked. And then I'm going to do something really sneaky here. I'm actually going to change this auto disconnect to 3. The reason I do this is because you can't have 2 connections open at the same time. So if I open up my database in my database window and I try to run my application, they're going to conflict and it's going to give me a lock exception. So in this case, just a tidbit, I'm going to set it so that it auto disconnects after 3 seconds so I can keep running my app, going to my database and going back and forth. So I'm going to do that, set it all up, click OK, and then it's going to set it up in my database window and you'll see the data right in your table right here. So it looks like it created an employee table. I love this view because you started from a Java object, doesn't know anything about databases, and all of a sudden it turned it into a table called employee with an ID, with a first name and the last name. So that's that. I just love seeing the two things and seeing, okay, did it create my table just fine? You know, am I happy with it? So that's something I really like doing. So I know I went off and you wanted it short, so I'm gonna stop here and see if anyone has any questions.
So there is one question, and that is, and it's kind of related to the previous demo,
Mm-hmm.
and that is how if you can do remote debugging with IntelliJ.
Yes, you can do remote debugging. So are you talking about doing the server debug? I
I
think
guess so, since it was during that demo.
yes. So you can do a server debug. I've actually done that, and I wanted to do a tutorial on it. It's pretty. I think. Okay, so let's see if we can do this here. If we do right click on here and do this, and let's open up the services window, you're gonna see me. Uh, if I struggle with this, don't judge me too much. Okay, so I put a breakpoint here in my servlet on my hello world, and I'm starting my server up in debug mode. And I'm hoping, let's see if this works. I'm hoping once my application comes up, let's see if it starts. off. I think I have to actually trigger it in order for it to happen. So let's see if this happens. So if I click, oh, hello servlet. Yes, there it is. Okay, so I triggered the servlet in debug mode. So now I am at this breakpoint in my servlet. I can debug, I can step over, I can see what my variables are here. I can change my message. Some people like to do that kind of thing. I like to restart and do all that stuff. But definitely, that's an option you can use to debug your server in IntelliJ IDEA.
Yeah, that's awesome. And everything you've shown here today is basically you start IntelliJ in the morning, and that's the tool you're in the all day, entire day, and then so you don't have to have all these different tools around.
Yes, I really like that. Even the scratches and consoles thing here, it's like a quick way to write a file that's like not even a text file. I used to have my to-dos in Notepad++, and now I just add a text file here, and it's really nice because you can just switch between my to-do list. I have it down here, and it's really nice that I can add notes or whatever I want. So that's another it, you don't have to have Notepad++. You don't have to have a bunch of other tools because it's all in here and including the terminal.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I think we are closing the hour, so I guess we should start to wrap up. And there are no more questions
Cool. Well, if
around.
anyone
So
has feedback or comments or some feature you'd like to see or something that even confuses you, I'd love to hear it. I'm always available on Twitter. You can message me, you can at me or whatever, and I'd love to hear the feedback. As you can see, we're constantly adding new features and fixing things up. The Ultimate team is super responsive and happy to change things that are going to make the user's life easier. So let us know.
yeah, and you actually had an improvement yourself to get your name into the translations, so it won't autocorrect
Yes.
your.
Yeah.
So I guess you should open up so you can actually
Open an
everybody can
issue.
add their name.
Yeah.
So yeah. So this was pretty awesome, we had planned for one demo and we got two.
Yes, and the second one was let's get this working together, and hopefully, as I build more and more demos, maybe I can come in and play around with it with everyone, and people can tell me, "Oh, this is where you made a typo," and we can figure it all out together.
Yeah. So it's been an super pleasure to have you here on Studio Jakarta EE, and I hope to have you here again later.
Yeah, thank
And
you for
also,
having me.
yeah, no, I hope we soon can get vaccinated and everybody can get vaccinated and we can go out traveling again and meet people out there. But
Yes.
until then, we are happy with this studio mode as well. So
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
yeah, thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for everybody who listened. And see you again later.